and he wrote a story. It was a short novel called The Metamorphosis. Did you read it in high school, college? Yeah. If you haven't read it, you should go ahead and read it because it's a good read. So the main character in that novel is Gregor Samsa, and he wakes up right at the very beginning, and he discovers that he is a beetle, a cockroach. And so he's laying there on his back with his legs, kind of all up in the air, and he's kicked off his covers, and his legs are kind of waving like this, and he's kind of with his claws, his mandibles, and kind of looking around thinking, how do I get out of bed? Because, beetles or cockroaches, they have a hard time getting up from their back. So I have a hard time sometimes getting out of bed too. But he had even a harder time. And so he was trying to figure out how to do that. And so finally, after a few pages, he finally is able to get out of bed. And then he realizes there's a problem because his clothes were not going to fit him so good anymore. Because now he's got 8 arms and legs, and he doesn't have any shirts that fit him, and he couldn't figure out how to get a tie around his neck. And so eventually, he tries not to let his family see him, but eventually they do see him, and they are just absolutely appalled. They've got a big bug living in their house. And not only that, but they realize that he is not going to be able to go to work. And that's the real disappointment, because they're depending on his paycheck in order to support them as a family. And so they are really upset that he is not going to be able to get out and go to work. And so then this whole story about this transformation for him, this metamorphosis. The title of the novel is The Metamorphosis, changing into a bug. And then as we read through the story, and then you realize a little bit about Kafka's intention, he's really meaning it as a critique of society and of culture, of seeing that every day we make choices, and those choices are a response to the pressures that are exerted on us. And so we get up in the morning and we do the things. We get shaved, we put ties on, we go off and we do our work, and we come back and go to bed, and then we get up in the morning and we go do it again, and we do it again, and we do it again, and we do it again. Oftentimes in these routines, not realizing that we are in the process of changing who we are, being formed into the likeness of something. Ted Turner said one time, he had this little ditty, his philosophy of life was early to bed, early to rise, work like hell and advertise. So it wasn't just, kind of around World War II, or World War I, it's kind of always this pressure to conform, this pressure to kind of make decisions, and then and not realizing that it's changing us into the kind of person that we wouldn't necessarily have decided at the beginning to be, and yet we find ourselves there. One commentator says, the surprise isn't that Gregor Samsa turned into a bug. He said, the surprise is that the rest of us don't. So transformation and what it means, and the culmination of choices, the result of the choices that we make, C.S. Lewis says that we are always, every day, making our way through all of our choices to one of two destinations, either the kingdom of darkness or the kingdom of light, making ourselves comfortable as citizens of one of those two places. We are eternal beings having a temporary existence, making our choices and being formed. And so we come to the account of the transfiguration of Jesus. It's the same in Greek, it's the same as metamorphosis. The change, it's the change. And so we follow Jesus and his disciples, and so we need to be able to follow it in our imagination, not just our rational thought, but to actually see it in order for it to impact us. So here's Jesus with his disciples. You know, there are a dozen disciples and there are more. And Jesus goes to Peter, James, and John. And I want you to watch particularly Peter in this experience. And he goes to Peter, James, and John, and he says, "Psst, hey, guys, I want you to come with me." And they say, "What? Boss, dude, what's going on?" And he says, I just want you to come with me. I just want you to come. I got just a little trip. I want us to go spend some time together. I want to show you something. And they say, well, okay, all right. So they pack off and they take off. So do you ever have somebody who you really admire, who you really like, who said, hey, I got something special and I want to show it to you. I want to show you this thing. It makes you feel it makes you feel special. It makes you feel important. There's this thing that's going to happen. This person's entrusting you with it, and so you go. And so these three disciples, this inner crew of Jesus, this small group, get together and they go up this side of this mountain. And they wind through the path and they go through the forest and all the brush and everything. And they go to the top of this mountain. And they come to a clearing, and maybe from where they're at, they can look over on the valley. They can see what looks like part of the whole world in front of them, stretched out. And one of them, John or James, they go and they start to collect some things, maybe to build a fire, so that they're going to clearly kind of settle out there for a little bit. And as they're kind of making small talk and preparing to take it easy for the night, all of a sudden there's this light, and so they look, and this light is just so bright. It is brighter than the sun. It burns and hurts their eyes. It's the face of Jesus. And not only his face, but his clothes, everything about him is just blindingly glorious. There's no threat to it, but it's scary. Looking at him, changed in this is their friend Jesus. This is their role model, their mentor, all of a sudden changed in this just inhuman way. And then there's two other people who are there with him. Moses, he says, and Elijah. Moses, who is the giver of the law, which for the Jews would have been everything. I mean, to meet Moses, I mean, he was the guy who was on the mountaintop with God and got the commands. And then Elijah, the fiery preacher, the king of all preachers, who when he preached, kings quaked. The two of them just there talking with Jesus like they're old friends and talking about the future and Jesus' plans, and Peter. So Peter has a hard time taking it all in, right? And so he says, "Hey Jesus, this is really great. So is it okay? Can I build 3 booths or 3 tents or 3 monuments or something to be able to mark this incredible occasion?" One of the other gospel writers says that Peter was talking because he didn't know what else to say. I don't know if you're like that. I'm like that. You get these awkward moments. You don't know what else to say, so you open your mouth and something comes out that's really stupid you wish you hadn't said before. So that's Peter. In the midst of this tremendous thing, you say something stupid. And so in response, there's this voice that comes out of the cloud, this glorious cloud, this voice. It's like an earthquake. And it says, "This is my beloved Son. In him I am well pleased." Those are the same words that happened at the baptism of Jesus, came from heaven, from God himself. But then maybe for Peter's benefit, he adds in this time, he says, "Listen to him. Listen to him." So Peter, God speaking to Peter, listen to him. All right, I'll shut up. All right. So this amazing voice, and it overwhelms them, and they fall down on their faces, and they're quaking, and they're shuddering, and they're in front of this glory that they don't understand. And then Jesus comes over and touches them. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. It's just me. Don't be afraid. And so they look up, and it's just Jesus. It's just Jesus. It's him. Just like they've always known him, just like they've always seen him. We call this story the Transfiguration, meaning change. But it's a little bit of a misnomer because Jesus wasn't really changed at all. All that happened was that Jesus revealed who he really was. So in this season of Epiphany means to reveal. And so Jesus just reveals who he'd been around, who he'd been all the time. It's just that he's relating to them as human beings, and so it's within him. He keeps it hidden within him. But for these three to be able to share what was really in him. I mean, this great secret. Could you imagine? Have you ever kept a great secret, something so important that you have to have somebody special in order to be able to share it with somebody who believes in you and trusts in you? So he's got these three guys who are his inner buds to be able to share with them who he really is, to reveal it to them. And they can only just take so much. And so now it's just Jesus caring for them and loving them. But there was a transfiguration that happened. And the transfiguration was Peter, James, and John. They were the ones. I mean, how could you see something like that and not be changed by it? And Peter, in the New Testament, in his letter, so we have two letters from Peter, and he wrote this. He said, "For we did not follow cleverly devised stories when we told you about the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ in power, but we were eyewitnesses of his majesty. He received honor and glory from God the Father when the voice came to him from the majestic glory, saying, 'This is my Son whom I love. With him I am well pleased.' We ourselves heard this voice that came from heaven when we were with him on the sacred mountain." Had an impact on Peter. It was one of the things that went from allowing Peter and James and John to emerge from being just these simple fishermen into now all of a sudden these brave, energetic, fully committed followers of Jesus who set everything else aside and risked their own lives and gave their own lives in order to be able to tell the world about this guy who was more than anybody else that they'd ever met, more than anyone else that they had ever seen. You know, what you see changes you. What you see changes you. PTSD is the struggle that people have who have seen violence and degradation, and it changes them. And they have to work their life to somehow try to recover from it. That's true for the kingdom of darkness, but it's also true for the kingdom of light. What we see changes us. And so that's why it's so important for us to be able to spend time with Jesus, to look in his face, to use our imagination, to be able to see him as he reveals himself to us. And without even realizing it, we change. We become more and more like him. Not because we try, but because he changes us. There was an experiment that was done by UCLA because they were concerned with the amount of cheating that their incoming freshman class was going through. And so they wanted to see if they could objectify that and study it in some way. And so they devised a test that it would be easy for students to be able to cheat. So almost 500 students, they gathered together. They separated them into two groups. So they had this easy to cheat on test, but they had two different kind of introductions to the test at the very first exercise in the test. For the one group, they said, we want you to name the most recent 10 books that you've read. Just give us the titles of the last 10 books that you've read. So those students go through and they fill out that list as best they can, and then they go through the test and they cheat just like everybody else has ever cheated. Then the second group, they say, we want you to list the 10 commandments and then finish the test. And so they go through and list the 10 commandments. Well, that's optimistic because a lot of them didn't know very many of the 10 commandments. Nobody of the hundreds of students who did this listed them all, but they all tried to list the 10 commandments, and they all kind of knew what the 10 commandments were. And then they went on to take the test. Nobody cheated. Nobody cheated, not one. Well, so now just think about that and what it says about human psychology, right? What we see, what we think about, changes us. Without even trying, it shapes us and molds us. And so this opportunity that we have from Jesus to spend time with him, to settle in with him, to hear him saying to us, "Psst, I got something for you. I got something special to show you. And so let's just go. Let's just go. Let's spend some time together and let me show you this thing." And to let him surprise us. Now, it's not a gimmick because God doesn't play gimmicks with us. You may remember from the prayer that we read that Jesus told them not to tell anybody because he was going to go to the cross and he was going to die and he was going to be raised from the dead. So this transfiguration wasn't an escape from the cross. It was emboldening them, Peter, James, and John, giving them courage to be able to walk with Jesus through the time of the cross. And so for us, as we think about transfiguration, transformation, and what our transformation means, it means not escape from the challenges of this world, but the courage and the stamina in order to be able to face them. This is a book that we're going to be using, those who would like to, through the season of Lent. It's called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality Day by Day. It's an 8-week, 40-day meditation, an opportunity to meet Jesus in your own kind of quiet time. Or you can do it like Peter, James, and John. You can do it with a group. Get together. Just grab some friends and get together. We have a life group who's going to be doing it together. Just an opportunity to be able to meet with Jesus and to be able to allow him to reveal himself to you. And in here is a series of these kind of meditations, but this is a poem that they offer. I asked God for strength that I might achieve. I was made weak that I might learn to obey. I asked for health that I might do great things. I was given infirmity that I might do better things. I asked for riches that I might be happy. I was given poverty that I might be wise. I asked for power when I was young that I might have the praise of men. I was given weakness that I might feel the need for God. I asked for all things that I might enjoy life. I was given life that I might enjoy all things. Almost despite myself, my unspoken prayers were answered. I, among all people, most richly blessed. Transformation. Being shaped into the image of Christ. Being melted by his love. Emboldened by his courage. Strengthened to be citizens of his kingdom, to do his will. Amen. So let's stand together.